Here we go. Welcome to Cannes.
Yes. I joke that basically talking about Cannes 2 weeks after Cannes feels like writing about, like 2025 trends in May. But, we're here, we're talking about it, and maybe needed a little time to digest, but also time to actually get some actual work done.
Right. And I think there's some big kind of call outs that we'll have, some commonalities to kind of recap that are pretty big takeaways for Cannes, but also beyond.
Yeah. I think having some time to kind of sit with it is such a, if you haven't been, it is an incredibly chaotic, mostly hot experience. And there's not really a lot of time for or desire to reflect in the moment, right? But now is an opportunity, and basically everything planning for Cannes starts now. And before you tune out, if you're a brand that doesn't think that Cannes is involved, do stay for the end, because I actually think there's an enormous opportunity for brands that aren't part of the traditional advertising, buying ads world to really show up to an extremely captive audience. So we can talk about that in the end.
A lot of opportunity. Yeah. All right. Much anticipated Cannes recap.
Let's dive in. I think we should go just in order of some favorites and the ones that, stood out the most, and then kind of things will deteriorate in terms of respect from there. So If you're here for the tea, stay to the... Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in. Middle.
All right. So, assuming we're
in.
kicking it off with Pinterest.
Yes. For me, Pinterest was the tippy top. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why was it the tippy top? For me, one of the things that really stood out about Pinterest for me, and Pinterest is, they're very good at experiential. They have a lot of experience doing it. They have a whole team working there, they're really robust in this space. But one of the things that I think was really incredible about their experience, and I know they've been doing this for a number of years now, is how they really brought their brand to life in a way that wasn't just digital. It wasn't just screens. It wasn't talks. Well, there were some talks. It wasn't come here and sit in the hot room in a panel. It was really about experiencing the brand and becoming excited about the actual brand of Pinterest. And you leave thinking to yourself, yeah, you might not have heard 27 creators talk about blah, 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 blah. But what you leave with is actually, oh my gosh, this brand is cool. It's interesting. They're working with really amazing people. They've got cool ideas, and you want to work with them, right? You're inspired by them. And I think big picture, and one of the takeaways that I have is there was a distinct lack of inspiration at Cannes. The sort of flavor of inspiration was mostly panels, and the flavor was pretty bland.
Same. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. Pinterest killed it. And what's so interesting and so inspiring about it was they really did it from yes, it was an amazing experience when you walk through all of the various parts and pieces, and it was quite dynamic in the experience, but that it literally tied back to what the brand was launching with, kind of the new things that they had, or kind of the overall experience, and really did it in a very true way to Pinterest and to the users of Pinterest, and really brought the brand to life. It was just, every aspect was really dialed in and very thoughtful of the consumer journey, of the user experience. And I love that they not just kind of say that they're creator led, but literally the artists that they had there were the creators, and they were giving them props and talking about them. And they were literally leading those particular experiences, whether it was kind of the VIP upstairs with kind of the carabiners and things that were so rad, the stitching hat that you got. And of course, Rizzo downstairs, the fact that they brought the artist in, and that was such a beautiful experience to visually see and draw people in, but actually what you were able to create.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many good experience. Yeah. Just so many good experiences. It was really, truly experiential. But then they were able to hit on their products. They were able to hit on the Pinterest, trends that they do, like the fisherman trend and the other trends that they had, they were able to hit on their new AI feature with the Aura thing that they had. Like they were able to tie in things that are traditionally like pretty dry to talk about. I mean, I guess as like a whole, Pinterest is the least dry of many things, but like they really did an excellent job of kind of like showcasing like some of the unique things about Pinterest and like why Pinterest is an interesting place to spend time as a consumer and worthwhile for a brand.
Totally. I think the one call out I do have, as you know, is I think when you have such a dialed in experience as that, right? It was so dialed in all of the various parts and pieces that when you're lacking and one piece isn't dialed in, it really stands out. So the tattoos, I had an appointment. I was ready to go the next day and get a tattoo.
Not much that wouldn't take you to get a tattoo. Like, I mean, it's really
no
a low bar.
Right. Thank you. True. And it's very hard, but yet those were not connected. The fisherman aesthetic, I would 100% be there. There could be so much off of that. And that's what I anticipated them to be. And then there was the list of Brazil and something else that were not at all a complete disconnect from that. So that would be my only opportunity.
I will say though, the line for the tattoos, you were maybe one of the few people who had like, you know, an issue with it, because the line 9:30 in the morning, there was a line or 9 o'clock in the morning, which is quite the feat after people have been out on yachts all night. So, you know, really props to them. And honestly, if you want to draw a crowd, Yahoo, maybe have some tattoos because it helps.
Right.
There you go. Then I would just say the last thing that I really thought was like two good call outs for me was that one of the ways that they were kind of showing, you know, obviously they had meeting spaces and everything for brands, but one of the things that they were doing was like they were taking brands around kind of, and VIPs, like taking us around and showing us kind of the different areas. And the tour became a way for them to talk about what Pinterest is doing, right? And it was so much more engaging than you just like trying to figure that out on your own, right? It gave them a platform to talk about the uniqueness of the brand. And so they were doing that. I was watching them. They were constantly giving tours to all sorts of people. And it was a very engaging way of receiving information. So props to them on that. And then the last thing is we were invited to the Emma Chamberlain like launch talk that she had. She came out with a coffee in collaboration with Pinterest about the fisherman trend. And I will say, one, air conditioning, huge. Like, I know not the most environmentally friendly, but dear God, it was the most comfortable talk I sat in. And then two, I really enjoyed the vulnerability of Emma. Like, I really enjoyed her the conversation was very much not really about the coffee and much more about who she was. And her vulnerability was kind of refreshing. And then the other thing, I just adored that the CEO was like kind of fanboying over her. Like his daughter was it was very like, it was a cute thing. And then the last thing was like sitting next to the people we sat next to. We sat next to some great people. And like, that's kind of one of the big takeaways for me is like so much about this is like who you get to meet and who you get to chat with. And there's really not many people really facilitating that in an interesting way. And that is such a huge opportunity. So huge.
Yeah. Connection. We'll talk about that in a bit, but that to me was everything.
All right, let's move on because we got a lot to go through here.
Female quotient.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you were there, you saw the Ferragamo hats. So you know that female quotient was in existence because those Ferragamo hats were everywhere. But that's not really all that was there. And for me, like what was really there were kind of two things. They did a lot of physical takeaways with like the hats. But then the talks that I saw there, of all the talks that I saw, these were the most action-oriented talks that I saw. They were the ones where it was clear that the hosts of the panel, the moderators, had been given a mandate almost to make these talks useful and like try to pull out literally nuggets of things that you could walk away with. Like I sat in an AI panel, and I sat in a lot of AI panels, and most of them are just like people just chatting away, like not really making a connection between, like, it's like, oh, AI is not going to take our jobs and like everybody's going to be okay. And like, you know, it's really just going to amp up and speed up creativity. Like that is not at all what AI is going to do, guys. So like, let's just stop that conversation. And one of the things that this conversation had was like, how can we more actively into our lives. And the recommendation that I walked away with was integrate it into your personal life, and you will understand how AI works so much quicker. And then you can start to really use that knowledge at work. And to me,
It's a great
it was
takeaway.
just, yeah, it was just like, there was some really amazing people on the panel. I also thought another interesting takeaway on that panel was about how there was a person who worked, let's say she was at Google, but truthfully, I don't remember. But she had no arms. She couldn't use her arms, rather. And she was talking about how one of the amazing things about AI was that it was going to be like this bridge for disability, and it would take away some of the barriers of entry for people with disabilities. But you have to think about it and do that thoughtfully, but that it could really provide this bridge that people with disabilities have never really had before. And that was really inspiring. Like, there was just a lot of inspiring things being said in every talk. I went to one on leadership for women, and it was really, I should have taken more notes, but it was just one of the most inspiring talks, and very few inspiring talks, quite honestly, throughout the week.
Yeah, you came back super inspired by those. That was the day I was judging, so I wasn't privy to any of those, but I remember you coming back and telling me about them, and they sounded amazing. And you're recapping them sounds amazing and sound quite different than the rest of it, which is also super inspiring. I think for me, I went a couple of days before, and I think they really thought out kind of the consumer journey more than any other experience I visited. They really kind of thought through. I loved that yes, the hats. The hats were a thing that you would see people having these. There was a little label on them. You couldn't quite tell, having these hats throughout. And it was, mind you, it was hot AF. It was so hot out. So you definitely were like, crap, I didn't pack a hat. I need a hat. So there was that kind of thoughtfulness. And then it was broadcast everywhere. And then when you went into the lounge, they were doing glam for people. Of course, you had to wait in line. They were embroidering tote bags. Of course, you had to wait in line. But then they also were giving away things, and they were giving away kind of eye masks. They were giving away Band-Aids. They were giving away really, really thoughtful things that people, and especially women, would actually need. And they really dialed that in. I thought that from kind of really being seen and heard was really thoughtful.
Yeah, let's be clear. They also really needed hats, and they also really needed Band-Aids. So, I was actually slightly disappointed that there wasn't more representation of men at the female quotient. Let's just say you could have learned a lot from turning up to that as a man. Our friend Henry went, and of course he went because he's amazing. But
he's rad.
Shout out to the men who actually went, because I think that being included in that conversation is part of the whole issue. So would love to see that. I think the failure there, and we can talk about Snapchat in general, but they had a booth. There was not a soul in that booth. It was sad. It was in the back room. It felt like they didn't really understand the assignment. It was oh yeah, we can give you this booth. And it was just not integrated into the whole thing. But they had ice cream that people were into, and they had other things it was a very thoughtfully done event. The only thing I would say is that my brain was literally cooked while I was sitting outside watching the panel. I couldn't stay for the second panel outside because I was going to have heat stroke. So I went inside, and then there was just all of us crammed inside of this section of the air conditioned room with no screen to really watch. And that part, obviously you can't anticipate, I think, the heat that we experience, but I would say the world has figured out ways to make sun structures that can breathe, and whoever is doing these events needs to study those, because those sun panels aren't doing anything other than creating small ovens for us to all sit in, and then nobody wants to stay. So I would just say that needs to get fixed next year, please.
Let's move on to Collins. Talk about a breath of fresh air.
Literally a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Collins House, I would say, they had some talks, and I did see one talk, and we can talk about that in a second, of one talk that I really did enjoy there. But one of the biggest thing for me, the Collins House did well, it was atmosphere. It was just, it felt like you were showing up to a friend's house in the best way possible. We were greeted really nicely. We were moved out of the way really nice.
Right. So let's talk about that greeting for a second. So you get to this place, you kind of, it's off of the path, right? It's off of the Crescent. and you take a little golf cart up there. Somebody drops you off and you get into this beautiful mansion. And then there are these really kind of thoughtful signs throughout. But basically, everybody removes their badge. Like it's just kind of it's a much cooler environment. There's grass everywhere. And we walked in and there was a talk going on. There was a talk going on and we kind of walked towards it. And these two wonderful humans, and I think I wrote about this, walked towards us and they didn't say, go that way, go other way, guys, you're in the way. Nothing like that. They said, hey, hi, I'm blah, 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 blah. Nice to meet you. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, tell me more. Oh, you know what? There's a better way to go around. That set the atmosphere immediately and was such a different experience than it could have been.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by it felt like you came to a friend's house, right? Like if your friend met you, they like be like, yay, you're here. Yeah, like don't go through the kitchen. Like it's a mess in there. It's too busy. Like, go around the back. Like that's how it felt. And when we met Brian, like he similarly like was very like, lots of compliments on my outfit. So of course I really liked him, but doesn't take much. But, like I think it was just really all about energy. And I really enjoyed so in one of the talks we watched, which wasn't my favorite of the panels, and I can talk about my favorite one, but he was like penalizing the panel if they use these buzzwords like authenticity. He was like, you have one more authenticity left. And I was like, praise the Lord. Because quite honestly, if there was a drinking game at Cannes, you would die if authenticity was the word. Like you would just be done.
For sure have alcohol poisoning.
You would be done in the first day. Like absolutely everybody's favorite buzzword, and not really used in a way that was necessary, quite honestly. So anyway, we'll talk about that. But the panel I did really enjoy was the future of attention. And the person I most enjoyed actually addressed authenticity in the way that I thought was the most authentic. So Ken Hertz, who, Hertz, Lichtenstein, Young, and Polk? I don't know. You know me and names.
Yep.
I had to write it down just so that I could say
That's right.
He basically, Ken, who was like talking, and he was saying like, hey, like, here's the thing. Like everybody says that, authenticity is realness. And he's like, that's just complete bullshit. Like every creator like is trained. The better ones are comedians and sports stars, and actors are terrible at authenticity because they're not used to having to be authentic and they're used to a script. And like, it's, and he was just very truthful. And I think that's something that we all know. And there's so much talk around like, we work with creators because they're authentic. No, you don't work with creators because they're authentic. You work with creators because you want to take their little bit of niche that they have, their little bit of like thought space that they have. You want to align your brand with that many, 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 many times over. And you're hoping that in some way, this one little thing like brings out that thing in your brand, right? And authenticity got nothing to do with it. And I'm just over it.
Yeah, it was a great panel. He was great. He was great. I agree. Yeah.
He was great. And you know what? Like actually all the people on that panel were interesting. Like I did enjoy Sophie from Diageo and Greg from MoneyGram. Like they were actually like, the conversation was a really good conversation. And one of the things I liked about the Collins House was they had some talks outside and some talks inside. The inside one was a little hot, but it was like I like that they kind of varied the atmosphere throughout the day so that if you did stay, it felt really kind of dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of that. And I think one of the reasons that talk was so good was because it was authentic, because these people, and there was something I think about the atmosphere and about Brian and all of the parts and pieces that kind of set the stage for that. It felt less performative and more kind of an intimate conversation. And I think thus, the people that were speaking really kind of opened up and were very kind of authentic and vulnerable and really shared their experience versus kind of a keynote that their company kind of gave them to.
Yes, exactly.
Speak to.
I think so many brand people on panels that we saw were basically like, oh, we've paid for our like CMO or our this person to be on this stage. And we all kind of know that. But then they're not really like talking about anything that they can actually add value to, right? And so this is something that and they're not speaking very openly. And I thought, like you said, like this felt like we were sitting in someone's living room and we'd maybe all had a little bit of rosé, but at that point we hadn't really had any rosé.
Not yet.
And you were just chatting and people were being funny and people were, making fun of themselves and self-deprecating and saying things that were like Ken, saying things that are a little bit controversial. And you could see like the other two people on the panel being like, wow, really, are we saying these things? And that is what people want. So kudos to them for doing that.
Yeah. Bravo, Brian and team. It was really a team, which is great.
Also, shout out on the water, because they really did well with the water.
It felt very hydrated, felt very taken care of, the food, all the things. But again, I think it was really the atmosphere, and then that was really the conduit for all the things. Yeah. All right. Let's keep it moving. TikTok put on, I mean, obviously every brand basically who was on the Quotient, like they had like a full series of like, this talk on this person or this panel on this. They had a lot of their like sort of insider TikTok scientist. I can't remember what he was, like his role was, but he was like, this person who was supposed to be like, the interpreter of TikTok, but from TikTok, which is interesting. They had a bunch of creators at the end in sort of more like closed settings. So they had a lot going on. But for me and for you, so we showed up and we were shockingly, I know this is like absolutely impossible to believe. But I know, hold on guys. Hold on.
But we were early. We were too early, and we wanted to pick up our bracelets. And we were told when we were walking up, like, oh yeah, like just go pick up a bracelet and you can come. So it started at noon and we were there at 11:30. And they were like, yeah, go pick up your bracelets and just come back at noon. Perfect. We get there and they're like, absolutely not. You can't do this. And the staff at TikTok, like the actual staff who run TikTok's events team in-house, were like, whoa. If they've been told one thing, then they get honored that thing. We don't need to do it for everyone else, but like this happens. And they were taking care of people by giving them umbrellas in the sun. Like they were just running an event in a way that, our best friend Jen Kaplan would run an event, right? Like it's like where you
and that is the highest bar you can get,
the highest praise possible. So I would just say that there are people who get that your first impression of a brand, whether that's when you get your bracelet or when you walk in, they understood that's the impression that you're walking away with, right? Like had we gone up and had like this big kind of to do and like we'd been standing in line and then we couldn't get it, it would have totally changed our perception of the brand. The other thing that I thought that they did well, I mean, inside they also had some experiential stuff, not quite as experiential as Pinterest, but similarly kind of like, the mentality was similar.
Well done.
Yeah, there was things for you to interact with. They felt like doable and short. There were no lines. The only line that there was for the swag. And part of that was because they had the swag du jour, which was the portable electric fan, which Kirsten nicknamed the menopause fan. But that's only because...
It's totally the menopause. Anybody in my generation is going to be like, yeah, it's the menopause fan.
Right. And I think the reality is that most people weren't there mentally and were just like, how do I survive this experience? And I have to say that of all the swag that I brought home, the menopause fan was the biggest hit with my daughter. Like she loves that thing. That thing is getting used all the time. I'm constantly being reminded of TikTok.
It's huge with 50-year-olds and huge with 5-year-olds. So there you have it.
It's got a really big age span for that piece of swag. But the downside, I would say, is that the swag, like unlike Canva, who we'll talk about next, like the swag was very like corporate identity, like let's just put a logo on it. And it was good swag. And they actually had this thing where they were giving away like small businesses. They were also giving away like real product from small businesses, which I really liked. You had to have like gone in or somehow registered or something, but it was interesting. But the actual swag that they were giving, like they gave away a black tote bag and it's like, I don't want a black tote bag with a logo on it. And the Canva bag is complete opposite and you want to keep it, right? So I think if I were them next year, I would just really invest in a visual identity that feels right for Ken, right for them, and makes people like, when you see that swag, you're like, oh, like I want to go to whatever that is. And maybe they don't need that kind of draw, but yeah. That's what
Everybody wants that kind of draw. Yeah, I totally agree with you, I think. And it's not to say it should be a different visual identity. It's more building off of their current visual identity, and Canva that we'll talk about and LinkedIn did a great job of that, but just doing it so that you actually want these swag pieces, because there's not just like useful in the menopause fan, but like the bag is a tote that you actually want.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's like a campaign visual identity. Like that's all you need.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Canva, which does do visual identity to a T. And and one of the things I love about them is they really, in every activation I've seen as of recent, they really dial it in. And they do, it definitely was not as experiential as Pinterest, but all of the parts and pieces that they do are working.
Yes.
You don't see
and I will say
screen
at
that's
South
not working.
by,
You don't see parts and pieces.
Yeah. At South by, they did do a lot of experiential in that second space that we went to, and it had a completely different visual identity there. Toucan, like both felt really good, well designed and cool and interesting and right for kind of the event, right? Like the one at South by, right? Like the one at South by felt a little bit more techy and a little bit more cool, and then this one felt like very beachy and has like they had all these great stripes, which if you read the newsletter, you know I love a stripe. But it's like those bags, like the only thing I would change is maybe make the graphic smaller, but like once you turn it around, like I've been using that bag like all week. Like it's so useful for the beach. Well, I go to the lake a lot. I mean, what am I going to do? Love a tote bag. But one of the things that I thought beyond the swag that was good is that it was interesting that they seemed to really focus, and perhaps this was just my experience of it. So, everybody to their own, but my takeaway was they really focused on having kind of these different gatherings. So like I went to XP Lens, like brunch, and that was a gathering of experiential people. We went to a brand one that was like run by another agency that was about like brand people gathering. And it felt like they at least got that is something that people really want. Like they want places where they can meet the people that they want. I think that they could do that in a bigger way and like make that, maybe there's a way to make that more like it felt like maybe you were meeting some of the people that you already knew, which isn't bad, but then there could also be an opportunity to introduce people that they didn't necessarily know, and they could do something fun there. And then I say the other
using the space for community is what you're saying.
Yeah, they were definitely doing that. But I think if they could do it in a even more intentional way where they were like, hey, like, let's get these people together and like, like without playing matchmaker, but like, I think there are, there's the introverts and the extroverts at Con, and the introverts are needed to be pulled into the extroverts circle, right? It's like, I just bring you, so that helps, but not everybody has like an extrovert sidekick, right? I think that like, it can become a little insular of like meeting the same people. Anyway, I think that the idea of that was really great. And then they did have a few like they had the retro viewer things that was fun, kind of hidden.
Viewfinders,
yeah, the viewfinder things that were fun, and the popsicles, which were a delight, but could have been more integrated into like somehow
100%.
telling you about Canva and like like Canva is a tool that quite honestly like is an enterprise tool at this point. I didn't feel like maybe a good way it wasn't shoved down my throat, but I also didn't really walk away like knowing anything more about Canva that I didn't already know.
Yeah, agreed. And those great elements that they did have, and even like I think I was probably the only person to actually physically go into the ball pit. Like they had these, and they were beautiful, and they were aesthetically pleasing for sure, but they didn't draw you into the same level of like the experience of Pinterest bringing their brand to life.
Yes. All right, let's move on.
All right, LinkedIn.
I was pretty surprised by LinkedIn, to be honest. Like I was not that excited to go. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but it's not necessarily like a brand that I think of as being like, oh, like we need to go to LinkedIn. But they had some interesting things going on, and the vibe was very chill. It felt they had really great staff. So that was like my big like takeaway.
Really great
was like,
staff.
Wow, their staff was all excellent. Everyone there was accommodating, lovely, nice, informative, trying to tell you things without trying to sell you things. Like it was a breath of fresh air in terms of the niceness. Not other places weren't nice, but they weren't like noticeably nice.
They just balanced it really well. Like, I think it can't be emphasized enough. They weren't just like paid brand ambassadors. They chose the right people from their company who were knowledgeable and informative and like lovely, but not salesy. And I think that's a hard balance for any company to kind of, and they really nailed it across the board, because we had 3 different kind of run-ins or experiences with various.
Yeah, they have a
team.
They had a few activations kind of around, which was interesting. Like as a strategy, like they had like kind of this creator lounge, or like maybe more of a like the kind of like VIP section at the top. In the Carlton, and then they had another area where they were doing kind of like live interviews. We didn't get to go in there, but I was definitely curious about it. And they were really kind of, they had a creator space that we did use, and they kind of talked about like, you know, video, and I gave them my feedback on the video. So, you know, thank me if they fix it. And then like, I thought it was just really interesting how they kind of had all these different spaces, and they had a really good, I thought like for them, a pretty good visual identity. Like it felt cohesive. It didn't feel corporate. It felt a little bit like, you know, French coastal vibes, but like without being like too cheesy. They had very good food. I will say, like, also like I was so over the dip. Like I couldn't eat any more dip after 4 days. I was like, stop the dip. I can't. Like people can't live on dip. And they came through with some delicious sandwiches. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
But I do think one thing.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
It was the most fun I've seen that brand. And that was kind of a surprise and delight. Like, again, we didn't go into it expecting it to be really dialed in that way. And it was the most kind of refreshing and fun that I've seen that brand. And then when you had the actual experiences that they had, and then when you had the actual team that they had, it was really like, it was a great experience. And we posted a video that we did on LinkedIn.
Video booths are the new photo booth, right? Like that booth, like where they set it up with your phone, and it was like this little area, and it was well done. It was very simple, but like really worked. And I thought it was clever to like have creators kind of do that and like really get them to do things. And that was interesting. I will say that the talks and the panels seemed to be more focused on the brands that they wanted to advertise on the platform, which is obviously like, yeah, like maybe you spend a bunch of money on LinkedIn and then you get invited to talk on this panel. But like to me, like where they sort of lacked, or from the programming that I saw anyway, was that they didn't really lean into as much. Like there are some really cool B2B creators on LinkedIn that I follow, and like that's saying a lot. And I don't think that necessarily people really know about that. Like I think there's still a whole group of people who kind of function on LinkedIn as like, I won an award, like here's the like post about it, and like that's it. I got a new job. Like, and there's a lot more happening on LinkedIn, and I think there's a lot more inspiration to be had on LinkedIn these days. And I didn't feel like that was really a big focus from the content that I witnessed being programmed. So potential.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And that's a great example of would have loved to see them, and maybe for next year, and we're here if you want to talk, to really say, okay, what do we do best? And then really pull in those people. Because I don't think anybody else, any other platform has that, to really be able to lean into that. And maybe it's a yes, and maybe they do have the other talks as well, but really be able to lean into that, do that in addition, and not have kind of the usual talks about AI and all the things that everybody else, and creators in general, that everybody else is having. That's a nice way to differentiate and really pull out what's special about LinkedIn.
I would agree with that. And then I think we should just touch on the Carlton Hotel just briefly while we're here, because both TikTok and LinkedIn were both hosted at the Carlton, which is like effectively, if you haven't been, it's like effectively the hub, and it's absolute chaos in there. But positive thing is that nicest front desk people with the nicest tampons you're ever going to find. So if you're in search of it,
that tampon experience was the best.
Tippy top tampon experience. If you're in search of a tampon,
you heard it here first.
Go to Carlton Hotel. And if you're in search of a table to have a meeting and sit down and talk to somebody, absolutely do not go to the Carlton Hotel. Very mean, angry, overly heated, probably very stressed, uber French. And I say this from having lived in France and having lots of lovely French friends, but like, wow, like everything that you hear about like sort of like the epitome of a French waiter, like that was it. They have this bar inside and it's actually chill, but like the whole space just feels like it could be completely refigured to actually be a
It's an
useful
opportunity.
gathering space that was nice. And like people were in there, like I saw Emma in there, like people were gathering there. It's a hub. And yet it is not really functioning like it should be.
Yeah, and you can do, as we've seen many brands do, you can do chic, right? You can have your brand, which it definitely is. It's a wonderful brand and experience. And I know that I think they've been redoing it for the past couple of years, but you can do chic, but still make it kind of accessible, make it comfortable, make people actually want to be there and not just feel like they have to be a level. And again, the hotel staff, when needed a tampon, like they completely dialed that in, and that didn't feel anything like that. But when trying to get a seat, it definitely felt like, no, you've got to be this.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just go in and sponsor tables for people to stand at, that could be an opportunity for a brand.
Yeah,
all
for
right.
sure.
Moving on to brands and culture, our friends.
Yes.
Who I love.
I mean, the best. Yeah. Just going and that felt like your, and obviously I used it as that, like your good friend's house that was always fun. The bar was always open, even when it wasn't. And just very, very welcoming, but it always felt cool. It always felt fun. And they had super varied content. Like they really did. Every day was quite different and dynamic. So
yeah, they had a wellness day, which quite honestly, like, you know, like was very refreshing programming idea for this space because there's none of that. I do think it's hard for people to justify coming out of their world to come and experience that. So I think like, you know, it was nice that they kind of broke that day up and like that you could come up there and do things. And then Dudley was like offering rides up there. Like he was great. Dudley is like tippy top for me. But, you know, it's the people there to me, again, it's similar to Colin's house. Is like you feel welcome, you feel greeted, you feel like it's going to be a good time. So I would recommend people go there next year. It was good times. And if you crash it like we did and accidentally show up to a happy hour that's not happy hour, they'll still serve you rosé. So don't tell them I told you.
Sure will. Good can secret.
Just a
Yahoo.
Quick. Yeah, we have to touch on Yahoo quickly because quite honestly, like one of the cuter visual identities of the closet, right? Like on the beach, like really beautiful. It sounds like it was designed in-house by their team. Like it was adorable. It had like very vintage kind of beach vibes. It was super, super cute. And yet crickets, like literally like every time I walked by, there was no one there. Like every place is like bumping and this place was like chill, like too chill. And one thing that I would say is like there's two things I'd say. One is this is just proof that you have to have a good product. If you can't have any good, like all the great branding in the world, but if people aren't excited about the product, then that's difficult. And then the second thing I would say is they should have pulled a Canva. Like they should have had outside brands like, you know, other groups like XP Land and people who did all these other things. They should have hosted and had people host events to bring people into the space because the space was great. I could have maybe had my mind changed about, like I didn't really have an opportunity to have my mind changed about them because I was like, oh, well, it's not really anything going on. They could be doing a million different interesting things and I'd never know about it. So I would just say like that's a real opportunity to think like if you're a brand that's sort of like maybe like in that situation, thinking about how you can kind of bring in counter programming, bring in different gatherings, like that's a real opportunity.
Right. I think that's a great call. But I will say, you know, they really, because so many of the experiences, especially on the Crusette, were just big pop-ups with kind of a logo, and they really integrated into the experience of what Cannes should be. And it really felt thoughtful all the way through. But I think really leaning into community and bringing in programming, like there's such opportunity to do things and to do things a bit differently, especially in really tapping into the brand.
Yeah.
So
they would have killed
we're
with
here to
a
have
good
that
yoga
conversation.
Yeah. A good yoga class. That space was well made for yoga, I would say. It was the most open space. Indeed. They had some, like what I liked about it visually is that it had shade, but then it wasn't all covered. Like I was joking that like if you look back at the beach, like, and if you were on a boat, it just looks like a homeless encampment. Like it's terrible, like looking. So, you know, of the ones, like it actually looked like the most like structured, less chaotic versions of what was on the beach. But yeah, really sad to see.
Opportunity. All right, Sport
Opportunity.
Beach.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, we didn't really get to go into Sports Beach because it was so popular and we were a little bit behind the times. So next year, like Sports Beach, we're coming for you. But I will say it seemed like it was a big draw. There was obviously an enormous amount of athletes. Athletes were unsurprisingly like a massive portion of conversation in all of Cannes, I think. And one thing I did like is that they had like screens outside, so it felt like you could actually listen. You could see who was talking, and there were chairs and like provided by the city of Cannes. And I think they could have actually done a good job of like actually making that theirs, like, and sponsoring those chairs and more of them. But you could actually sit and listen to some talks, and that was like a cool thing to do. I think overflow in general, like TikTok had people wanting to get in and they couldn't get in. And like everybody generally had like some sort of overflow. And that feels like another opportunity. Like, how do you, but that was obviously a case in South by too. And like, that's something that I think they could really do something about.
Totally. And I think that's the thing about Sport Beach is like, and so many places were just thinking about what their experience right there and then was. And the opportunity is actually, the journey is so much longer than that. And one of the things I really liked about Sport Beach, the only thing, because again, we didn't really see it, but the fact that they put a TV that was not internal to see, but it was for the people walking by. That was the first moment that I saw where they really thought outside of their bubble and really, hey, how can we create this experience? Such opportunity to create that tenfold for sure. But like start to think about all brands can really start to think about that differently. And even in TikTok, like we loved, that they were giving away sunshades, sun parasols for people to use while they were in line. They were giving away water. Like you can take that to the umpteenth degree and really make it kind of truly an experience so that then that's what people are talking about. That's what people remember because they will remember those things. But I thought the TV kind of was the thing that signaled that they're not just thinking in their bubble.
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
Let's talk about Marriott.
Marriott.
Ooh, where to begin? So, okay, we were kindly invited to Marriott. The invitation said Massimo Bottura and Anthony Porowski. Is that how you say his name?
Sure.
I'll go with that. I know both of these chefs. I was excited. I like listening to chefs. I listen to chef podcasts to fall asleep.
This is true.
I was there. I was like, sign me up. I'm going. This is going to be great. My goodness. It was not great. And it was not great because they didn't understand the assignment. It wasn't not great because they didn't have the right talent. So like, kudos to them for having the talent that drew people to their event. But then you get in and it was, it was a classic, like sort of cocktail hour, like kind of vibe. And people were standing around. You could barely hear the talking. It was not a conversation at all. It was basically mostly one person talking, the other person looking like they didn't want to be there. And people were just flooding out. Like the vibe was just all off. And like, I'm going because I want to really connect with these cool, like they actually had people that were cool and interesting to go and listen to. And it just didn't feel like anything about hospitality. Like I want to see the future of like kind of like way Marriott's thinking and like what they're doing. And like, they have all these cool chefs working with them. They had past apps by the chefs, but then like they were basically all gone by the time everybody got there. Like it was just, everything didn't really work. Didn't really make sense. Didn't connect the dots for me. Like it should have been a cool table, should have been a dinner experience that I wanted to share on Instagram. It was none of those things.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity for the event itself, like all of the parts and pieces. This is somebody that maybe thought about the consumer journey before and kind of really had that dialed in, the right people, the right place, kind of, I think it was sold out, kind of all of those parts and pieces, but the actual experience itself left a lot to be desired.
Yeah,
and could have been super dynamic.
It could have been amazing. They also gave away books, like literally like yes. Cookbook at the end. And then I spent the rest of the night like walking around with like literally like a library's worth of recipes. And they didn't give you a tote for it. Like it was insane. So that experience could have also been thought through. If you're going to give people
a Marriott tote?
Any kind of tote would have been better than no tote at that point because it was a 400 pound book. But like a well-designed tote a la Canva would have really made a difference to that experience.
Yeah, and another brand can get out there like Marriott. Okay, brand innovators. I mean, these guys are killing it.
I just want to know, like, what event don't they show up to? I mean, it's very impressive. Like, it's very impressive that they have a presence at every single event, like in the history of all events, every single B2B event, they are there. But can we just say, like, I really enjoyed the one that we went to, Gary Vee in the talk by Gary
South by.
Vee in South by. But like their logo, it breaks my heart. It was blown up, like literally because it had to be big for the sign, and it was pixelated. Like I could see, like it looks like 1990s clip art. It's oh gosh, I can't. I would just love to help.
Right. But this is the thing is like, these guys are killing it. Can you imagine what they would be doing if they dialed in their brand? Can you imagine like the impact that be like something like this could have?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're here for it.
Yeah.
All right. BCG, Low Ceiling Award.
Yes. My note says that they win the Low Ceiling Award, which actually is a very hard category, Cam. So winning gold for Low Ceiling Award is one of the fiercest competitions that there is at Canva. Forget the Lions, Low Ceiling Award, super hard to win. But we found the location and managed to make it feel smaller than it already felt. Really props to them. I was there because I wanted to see the High Snobiety Luxury Report talk, which I was kindly invited to, and then was told was over when in fact it wasn't over. So not really the best overall check-in experience, but I am linking to the report, and I pulled out my favorite 2 nuggets for you all to read, which the first one is, like about luxury, and it was like really about like luxury is really about finding something unusual right now, and I do agree with that. So I thought that the report was actually interesting. I'd love to have gone to this talk. Talks about the luxury, like what's driving luxury now, and I actually think that many of the things on this list are quite true. So I would spend some time looking at the report. It's a little long, but could be more dynamic, quite honestly. But there are some good nuggets in there, so give it a look. I can't talk about it. We don't have time.
All right. No, we don't. Gold's House. This felt like a different world.
So first of all, the fashion, I thought people were going to come with game to con. This was our first con. So I was like thinking like the fashion game of all these creatives and all of these ad execs and all this da-da-da-da was going to be like, again, tippy top. This is my phrase of the day. Yeah. It was not tippy top. It was not.
There were some moments, but yes, overall.
Overall, it was like, granted, it was hot. Agreed. So like maybe people were having to wear outfits that they weren't expecting. You can still do fashion in the heat. No, but I'm wondering if people didn't like really wear their best fits because they were like I just have to survive not getting heat stroke. So, maybe. We'll give them that thing. But whoever the Goals House, like the crew at the Goals House was dressed to the nines. Like they were all the things. Like they took the bars was down here. They took it here. And it was like really great, really cool crowd for really like impactful kind of conversation around the future of impact. And there was a music concert, which again, like I thought like just entertainment value of this event could have been really projected into a lot of other events. I know that Collins House had music at the end, but like music throughout, like we're at the beach, we're having a good time, like a little interlude really wouldn't hurt anybody. So really props to them.
It was really moving. It was really moving. Like it kind of set the tone, of how supportive they were of the artist and how beautiful the music was and how vulnerable. And then it was actually before the talk, which I thought was really nice and did set kind of a very vulnerable, open and almost emotional tone to it, which was right for that event.
Yeah. And I think it also got people to sit down, quite honestly. Like people were sat and paying attention. So, which is, if you're giving a panel, like not a bad thing. Sunday dinner, I want to give a shout out to them because I benefited from your experience with Sunday dinner. So like, let's talk about that.
Lindsay hooked us up. Yeah. And this is what community is about, right? Like, this is totally what community is about. And I think that's what's so inspiring is that she really, like a lot of people talk about it, but she really does it and leads it. And the community really shows up. And I think, everything from finding a place to stay to this rad dinner went to, all of the parts and pieces. Like she really.
For people that aren't part of Sunday dinner, it's a Slack group. You have to be invited. It's like a community, but it's very like interactive and people, like that's how we found our place to stay. We ended up finding a really rad roommate who was super cool. The apartment was great. Yeah, Jamie was awesome. But it was just like, recommendations on footwear, very useful. But then you guys afterwards from the dinner, like went on a boat that maybe started to sink at some some point, and like you gained friends from that experience. And I think that is so much of what Cannes is about. Like it's about connecting, but then also connecting after the fact and late at night. And yeah, like there are big, like, you know, Cardi B performances and which are very good bonding experiences, but they don't always need to be so big as that. And I think that that is something that just allowing people to spend time and creating intimate moments for people to spend time together in the evening didn't really feel like it was like a super big focus. It was either like we're having this enormous party or nothing, or we're having the Marriott thing, which didn't feel like we could actually chat with half the people we wanted to chat with. So
yeah.
I just think that that's another learning for brands, is like people want to talk to other people and not necessarily just in big groups.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. And I wrote about it, was just the community. And I think starting out for me, this intimate dinner, and it was just because we're all in this community. And so there's a lowering of kind of the armor and opening of the vulnerability within that. And then really getting to connect, like connected to the girls from Joan and like just all of these different people. And many of which, like we had lunch throughout, you know, and I'll continue to kind of connect with these people because they were just rad humans. And so I think that for me was one of the biggest takeaways. They're not just these moments, but then these kind of continued conversations and continued connections that are really meaningful.
Yeah, that's how you met Peter, right? The new CEO of Depop, who was lovely and like, honestly,
Peter was through Charlotte. Yeah. Through Charlotte on the boat. Yeah.
Okay. Because it was rad. All right. And then let's just touch on Google. This is more of an anecdotal tale, because even though I have a lot of friends at Google, I could not get into Google. Don't know. One of the things that I heard, so I will say, touch on that. I went and tried a few times to get in, and they were like, "Oh, you have to have somebody come in and get you out." And there was a lot of angry folks on the boardwalk. Like it was just like people were mad because they were like, people were trying to meet the people that they were supposed to meet, and like then they were making it difficult, and it just felt like, again, like it was just not like, that's not the energy that you want in the front of your experience, like where people are just like huffing and puffing and angry and hot. Like, no. But right. I will say that I heard anecdotally that they were doing some like AI demos where they were showing people like, hey, like they took Slice, which is that like old school soda brand that like is now a healthy soda brand. I don't really understand that. But anyway, they took like Slice as like a case study, and they were like, let's make an AI campaign, like use AI to make a campaign. And they made like a radio station, and they made this and that, and they showed people how to put it together. And like, from what I heard, that sort of actionable, like this is how this world works, because people are trying to learn it so fast and it's coming fast and furious and they don't really know what to do. Like that really sounded like it was quite an impactful experience and quite useful. And generally like utility seemed to be like missing from a lot of the, like, what am I supposed to do with all of this knowledge? And like one of the things I've been thinking about is like 2 years ago, there was not a shitload of Substacks like writing about all the things that you need to know, like in like good company, like good thinking. And people aren't necessarily showing up to Con needing to be informed of things anymore, right? Like it's not your forum for like figuring out like what's been going on. You've been consuming this information like from a fire hose for the whole year. So the need for like having a panel that talks to you about like this is this and this is that and this happened and that happened is gone. Like that world doesn't exist anymore. Nobody needs that anymore. So what is it that people need right now? And they need clarity. They need connection. They need somebody to listen to their woes. Like the needs are completely different. And I would just say, this is going to be one of my takeaways is like, we got to revisit the needs. The needs have changed.
Yeah, totally. I think it's like completely rethinking it versus just amending it. And I think the world is changing so quickly. And so instead of just amending and saying like, oh, we're going to update from last year, you need to rethink of like, okay, what's actually happening? What do we do as a company? And where's our value? What's going to be useful? I think that's a great call out, because I heard the same thing about the Google experience. Okay, closed doors. We're going to hit on this a little bit in our takeaway.
Yeah, speaking of like just again anecdotally, so there's obviously like a lot of closed door meetings and like, you know, this person having a meeting, and there is a utility to everybody being in the same place at the same time, and like that there's value there. There is. But what I'm talking about more is what I heard a lot of is that they were like these small CMO kind of like sessions for just CMOs or just this kind of level of C-suite where they could like freely speak and like talk to their peers and say, like, this is the thing I'm going through, this safely, where it wasn't going to be like in this forum where everybody's listening to them. There was an opportunity to be vulnerable, but there was an opportunity to learn. And quite frankly, like this is where I see a lot of stuff happening next year, as I think there will be a lot more of that.
Totally. And I'd love to hear more comments on this and kind of input on this, because we've heard this a lot, seen this a lot, working on a few things ourselves. Like, think there's a real need and an opportunity to do this where it's not recorded. It's not, it really truly is a safe space, and you're both sharing, but also learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and learning, like, not just learning stuff that you already are, like, essentially consuming all year.
Not the obvious.
Like, learning things that you really genuinely need in order to do your job. All right, I want to touch on three things very, very quickly. I promise they'll be quick. One was Thrads, terrible name, but interesting company. They won so I went to an XP Land brunch, which was neither was an XP like experiential brunch, was neither experiential nor brunch, but it was interesting. And they handed out some awards, and Thrads won an award. And what they did, so Thrads basically is like a platform. They create ads in LLM, so like in ChatGPT. So if you're typing like, I want to find a dress that has polka dots that like is for big boobs, like for an event in summer, like, or it can't be gray because whatever. They will create like real-time ads inside of the LLM. So that's an interesting product. And what they did was they took a Rolls-Royce. They hired a Rolls-Royce. So it was like obviously very big and like flashy. And they were giving people air-conditioned rides up and down the Quotient so long as you were willing to listen to their pitch. And I just like the scrappiness. Like these are like three dudes who are probably 25 at the eldest, and they're figuring out how to get attention, and they did it. And so I thought that was really interesting. They also had a robot dog, which was a little bit weird, but like attention grabbing. Then I also at the same non-experiential, non-brunch, experiential brunch, saw the founder of Inkwell, which is about this woman who sort of is addressing sort of the lack of diversity at Cannes. And so she has started this event because when she went to Cannes, she really only saw like one of herself or two of herself. And she was like, this is a problem. We need to bring people. And they do scholarships and like try to bring in diversity. And she gave like, I wanted to like stand up and applaud her speech. Like it was really inspiring. They had a big visibility on the Quotient, like a big space. They had a lot of diverse speakers, obviously, and at a time where diversity and DEI are kind of like basically being shunned, she's still out there like saying like, no, this is valuable and needed. And I thought that was really important to do, but also like she is really inspiring. So if you're looking for inspiration in that space, like go check that woman out, because of course I don't know her name, but she was tippy top. And then in a maybe not so complimentary way, Substack. So Substack was not at all there, which may not be surprising because they don't do advertising yet. I bet they'll be there next year. But there were a lot of creators there. Myself, but a lot of other people invited to speak on panels. And there was a lot of representation of actual writers on Substack and there was nothing for us. Like no, like, hey, come and do this, as far as I know. I mean, maybe I just wasn't invited. But the other thing that really stood out, and this really truly is the crime, is that we had a lot of people asked to subscribe. And then I was like, oh yeah, let me just pull up the app. Surely, like every other app, there's a QR code. Like even LinkedIn has this, apparently. There's a QR code, like you just scan it and then you can see it and you're subscribed. Nothing. You pull it up, you go to share, and it's like literally your written out URL. Like, why is that helpful? So, boo, 0 points.
Opportunity across the board. I mean, Substack, there's so much around community, around programming, around really a presence, so many opportunities. Talk to us. We got thoughts, we got solutions.
Substack has changed the game of information and how we receive information. And I think they're a big part of why I think this event felt really outdated to me. And yet they weren't there. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Such an opportunity in the event overall.
Do you want to touch on judging Young Lions just quickly?
I would love to. I mean, it was such an amazing experience. The the Cannes team, the awards team, like as far as how dialed in, how beautiful of an experience it is, how informative, but yet beautiful that they make the experience. So it was judging young lions, so which is, I think, under 30, and it was the design category. So super diverse panel of judges, myself and 5 others. And it was just this amazing experience of kind of having these different teams come in, typically 2 people come in and present. Took the entire day, present kind of their work. And then we would kind of go through the process. Everything was dialed in. You had an iPad, you had the brief, you had all of these parts and pieces. The brief was real. It was going to be implemented. It was quite a challenging brief. And then be able to kind of have them present. English was often not their first language, but they presented dynamically in many, many cases, even if it wasn't. It was just a beautiful experience to really watch. And then, of course, the awards themselves, which were the following day, and seeing the energy and the experience of that. I actually connected with Alejandro from Adobe, who did a speech then and shared. They're one of the main sponsors. But again, they were so integrated in the way that they were showcasing their brand that it was really thoughtful. And that felt all the way through. The Cannes Lions team is absolutely amazing, and they're so heartfelt, yet they're so on it. And that balance was really beautiful. And you feel that throughout the entire experience. And then at the very end, after the awards, after everything's been announced and there's, people crying with joy, people crying with, being upset that they didn't win, then there's the opportunity for the designers to come and get feedback from us and really say, why didn't we win? And it was really amazing to see, these young designers come in and really be there for it, be willing to come and face it. There were many tears, and be able to say, I want to do better. I want to learn better. Tell me, and be able to really have these conversations about this is what worked. This is what didn't work. And that was just a really beautiful experience. Hard, but really, really beautiful that people really showed up for that. And I just can't say enough about the experience. It was really, really beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, you came away really inspired. So I'll also link to your post that you shared some other stuff.
Yeah. And one of my big takeaways, and we'll talk about it in a second, is that I think the Cannes line in general needs to be more integrated into the overall experience.
Yeah, and possibly more open. A lot of people obviously had tickets, but that passes, but then they had it in the basement. And most people that I know who had passes felt like that was really just really not cutting it, and really not respectful of kind of what the work and the effort and the time and energy that everybody puts into it is. So improvements to be made.
Totally. They could have had such a bigger presence than just in kind of the building itself. Think about it. It's the work can be duplicated. It's all just kind of printed out for you. It could have been experiences throughout the cassette. There's so much opportunity to really make sure that, yes, we're there and there's a lot of other things going on, but also let's really remember and be really honoring of the experience that really started in the first place.
Agreed. All right. And then just briefly, so we had Amazon, one of the things I heard is that they refurbished the parking lot in collaboration with the city of Cannes, and that they were going to donate their furniture. And I think that there's a lot of waste happening at events. So I really like that approach. Yeah. Overall, a little bit too corporate, but I like that they were thinking through that. We had Meta.
Cute uniforms.
And cute uniforms. And then we had Meta, which you said felt a little bit too much like a showroom. But I will say that anecdotally, I saw a lot of people wearing the glasses, a lot of people really excited about the glasses. And so there is that going.
Right. And I think that that's an experience that they took the consumer journey from the very beginning. Lisa's plane was, they gave away Meta glasses on her flight. I don't know if it was just first class or business or whatever it was. But again, they thought about the entire experience from the very beginning of not even at Cannes yet, which I thought was smart.
Right. That is smart. Then Tubi, was big purple tent for meetings. Snap, so I wrote about this last week or in this week's Sunday letter, but Snap had a lot going on with they seemed to really lean into the transport thing. They had the train, the little train. They had a bunch of cars driving around, which are all great. There is need for that. But when I read about Saturn and their social calendar thing that they had, that would have been such an incredible way to integrate yourself into the event and actually show people that you're thinking and the utility of your product. The ability to find people at Cannes. So people are giving you their schedules. Some people have your friend Lisa, she's pulling up a whole spreadsheet of where she's going to be. People are using calendar events. It's very difficult to meet the people where you want to meet them, and coordinating and texting and well, let's meet here. Is this a good place? Let's change the venue. This place is crowded. It's a fucking mess. So that would have been killer. like absolutely game-changing feature. And so next year, like if they still really have that feature, they should use that as a way to basically be in everybody's pockets, on everyone's screen, the way that you communicate with people. They could have made themselves an essential component of Cannes, and they missed it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's a great call out, and really think about it. Even if it wasn't with Saturn, that's an opportunity for a brand to say, what do we do? And what value can we create here versus like,
Google.
oh, and then we'll have a photo booth pop up with female quotient and we'll do this, like, versus really say like that's where a brand should really start.
Yeah. I mean, a social calendar.
Which leads us to
our takeaways. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to touch on DoorDash.
DoorDash.
Which basically had like DoorDash had like these windows that were like advertisements, and quite honestly, it just didn't work for me. But like, yeah, that.
But the fact that they were there, like I loved the color red. It's a good color. It was bright. It was a good location. They could have really dialed it in had they just said like, what's the value that we can bring versus like, how do we, I think there were two conversations, like few were like, what's the value that we can bring? Right. And then the majority were like, how big can we make our logo and where can we put it?
Right. I will say that like, so, and I'm going to write about this on Sunday, but there's this brand in the UK, that a baked bean brand, and they from Glastonbury had like at the train station from Glastonbury, where you're coming back, it's really late, you know, you're going to get home at 2 a.m. They were handing out baked beans to people so that they could have something to eat for dinner. And it was a huge success, right? And to me, like one of the things that DoorDash could have done is like, hey, you've only eaten dip all day. Like, let's like fix dinner for you, because I would have been there for it. So
yes, you would have.
Yes,
yeah,
there was a lot
great
of
call.
opportunity.
Yeah, such an opportunity.
Yeah, if they had been delivering emergency snow cones, we would have been there. All right, so we've covered off on a lot of the hot takes, but I just want to kind of bring like them to kind of one place for everybody, right? Well, number one, the content overall, like all of these panels, all these talks, all this effort being put into kind of content creation, I think needs to go out the window. Stop. No one needs it. As I've said, we're all getting it all year. There's no need to get it in this one location. So, and I would also say that the conversations, the things that are being talked about, authenticity, creators, it's literally the same conversation being had ad nauseum all day long from every single location. And it's, I mean, the only thing that like, you know, Sports Beach obviously had a sports lens to it, but like it was more or less the same type of thing. And I would just say, I really don't think that that's the future of Cannes anymore, and that there needs to be a really big rethinking about what the value of this like content is, because I don't think it's what it is anymore.
Right. We've talked about this ad nauseum, just the fact of everyone's having the same conversation and it's all at surface level. It's really just informing. There were very few like, oh, wow, that's going to make a difference. That's a great takeaway. That's something that's really useful. And that's really where to lean in. It's not to say it can't be about creators or AI or things like that, but kind of be different and make sure from your brand, you're bringing value and something that's unique to you versus just the same recycled conversation everyone's having.
Yes. Okay. To that end, I would say that the closed door sessions, like what I heard overwhelmingly was that CMOs are kind of like treading water right now. And I think that there is a real potential for brands, for businesses of all different kinds, agencies, creators, everybody, to be thinking about what that really means. That is the need. That is the desire. So how can you tap into that and actually kind of really reinvent like what people need when they're at Cannes?
Yeah. And I think that's a tricky one because it's not about just getting your brand kind of in your face. It's about it not being recorded, not being this, and really giving them the space, the opportunity, the connections, all of the parts and pieces to really do that. But I heard the same thing. I think that's only going to become more and more important.
Yeah. And then I would say connection. Obviously, we've talked about that, creating opportunities for people to connect. Big shout out to Ben Dietz and Breakfast Club, who we met up with. And I think that type of thing, like these informal venues where people can really connect and have a coffee together or have a matcha and really meet people that they maybe don't always get to meet, but like in these like kind of non-networky sessions. Yes, there are the yachts, and yes, but there is a different level of connection that people are really craving. And I think there's a massive opportunity to really provide that. A la Sunday dinner.
Right.
A la Brands and Culture. Yeah. Colin's House did that too. And I think, I would say More of that, please. Number 4, I would say is, I think we need more experiences, like not just Pinterest level experiences, but like, let's use Pinterest as the example. But I would say like, even like, think about like Milan Design Week. Like, people want to be inspired. People want to leave like talking about your brand. Like, they want to leave feeling like, wow, like that was so cool. Like when I went to see Google at Milan Design Week, like that completely changed how I had been thinking about Google. I want that when I'm at Cannes. Like, I want to have my impression of your business changed, or changed in this really kind of compelling way. And yes, like, you know, those are difficult and like they're expensive, but that's what we want. We want things to be inspired by. So they don't need to necessarily be so designy and so like kind of like avant-garde. Like, we don't need all of that aspect of it, but I do think that there is an appetite for different kinds of experiences.
For sure. And I think the breakdown when we talked about kind of versus Milan Design Week was a really good example. I think so much of what we saw was about brand exposure and like, make sure it's big and they can see our logo and we got all of our products here and we got all, like, do we check every box, versus kind of experience and inspiration. And again, I think that's why Pinterest did that so well. But you walked away being like, wow, this, same thing with LinkedIn. You walked away being, this brand is cooler than I thought it was, or I'm more interested in it, or I'd really like to be a part of it, or whatever it might be. Your assumption of the brand was the bar was raised to a higher level of how you were thinking about the brand versus just, oh yeah, I remember seeing that logo a ton of times.
Yeah. And I will say, I heard anecdotally from a lot of CMOs and people that I met while I was there that they were like, yeah, I'm really like not interested. Like, she's like people were saying like, I'm here, I'm having the meetings that I want. I'm not necessarily in the mood to be sold to. And I think that's generally like a global feeling right now, is that like, that maybe 10 years ago, you were like expected to just go and like, you know, swallow the pill and like get sold to like day in, day out by a salesperson. That era is done and dusted, and no one wants that. But the way to really sell now is to really sell them on your, like, how you're thinking, how are you different? Why should I be participating in you? Why should I be putting my money where it is? Because quite honestly, there's all these creators all over the place that I could be going to put my money with them. And like, that's kind of another side of Cannes that is starting to happen, where there were lots of creators there who are holding meetings and they're competing for your ad dollars. So I would say, how do you see yourself in this world? And it needs to be reinvented. All right. Number 5, again, I think we were really missing utility. Like, I think it sounded like Google provided that with the AI, but like, how can you be useful? And I think Female Quotient did that well. They did it well in a few different ways, right? They thought about like, you need hats and you need this and you need that, but they also gave really actionable takeaways that were really useful to people in their talks. There's a lot of different ways to be useful. Snap could have been useful with Saturn. There's lots of ways to be useful, but there wasn't a lot of brands thinking about how to be useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest takeaway for brands, is that's where the brief needs to start, is really about like, not saying how are we amending it from last year or how are we doing this, but really like, okay, it's a completely different landscape. What do we offer? How are we useful? What's the experience? Kind of all of those parts and pieces to really be able to share the best of their brand. And that's really where the brief should start across the board, when you're thinking about having a presence at Cannes.
Agreed. I would say fewer leaders once removed is kind of how I am phrasing this. And I think there's probably a better way to say this, but there were a lot of people talking about not their expertise. So there was people talking about working with creators who probably never touched like any form of social media to do with their brand, or ever even talked to a creator. And then they're out there teaching us about creator economy, or like your favorite one, like Amazon teaching you about innovation, is probably not where you want to be learning about innovation. And I would say there was just a lot of expertise that wasn't getting shared. Like, there were people who were talking and I was like, I really want to know how you're handling kind of that closed door thing. Like, how are you handling this particularly difficult time, or this kind of difficult thing? These are things that I don't get to meet you. Like, I don't get to learn from a CMO all the time. Like, tell the world what it is that you know. And I would say, like, to the people who are doing the programming, think about that. Like, think about the fact that there may be people who are better to talk about creator economy than the CMO, and invite them in. Plenty of them, like tons of social media managers out there who go to like their team, who would be incredible and would really give you some actionable takeaways. And then let the CMOs actually share their expertise, because that would be really refreshing.
Right. I think that is such a big takeaway for really the overall programming, and would make such a difference. Like, I think everybody has value, but it's really just understanding your value. And I think it all gets into this a little bit like Emperor's New Clothes. Like, oh, well, I'm a CMO, I've got to be talking about AI, or I'm a big company, I've got to be talking about innovation. Like, whatever it is, you kind of get on that train of like, oh, well, of course we need to be talking about this, versus really saying, again, it goes back to the usefulness. Like, what is your expertise within that? And if you're a huge organization, you're probably not an expert in innovation. But you're probably an expert in a lot of other things, maybe supply chain, maybe how to, have a creative team that's really listening to you, even in a corporate environment. Like, there's a lot of things that you do have expertise in, and it's really leaning into those, because there's a huge audience there. There's a lot to talk about, and you can skew it AI or content or whatever it might be, as long as that's your expertise. But I think the idea of like, there's 5 buckets that everybody had to fall into, and whether or not that was their expertise, that's what they talked on, is probably not the move.
Agreed. I will say, like, the kind of opposite was true at South by. Like, there were a lot of really I didn't think the topic sounded good, but there was a lot of expertise being had and shared there. And so I think, I would think about that in a big way. Number 7, where were our hydration brands? Where were our sunscreen brands? I know that these aren't typically like where you think to pop up, but let me tell you, there was a lot of captive audience there, a lot of brand people who maybe want to get into partnership with you. Liquid IV.
Influencers.
Vacations, Sunbum, like, God, the list of things that one, what's the great Band-Aid brand that I love that comes in the little box? Ollie, I don't know.
Oh, the tins. Yeah. Those are great.
But like, those are great.
Yeah. There's so much. Yeah.
If you're a brand that is not in the advertising space, I actually think that this is a great place to activate, to pop up. This would, like, a small pop-up. I'm not talking about your big, like, take over a beach thing, but like, have a cart, have a little food truck, have a this, have a that. So many people there who would be clamoring for your products, and it's a great place to do trialing.
Right. And are in desperate need of electrolytes. You can be the hero, and that can be the opportunity. And again, it's coming at it from the experience standpoint.
Yeah, pure sport out there, just putting salt on watermelon. Like, I would have killed like 27 like electrolytes on a watermelon slice. I would have been there. All right. I will say that number 8, everything was running on Luma. So big shout out to Luma, because everybody was loving you. They're like a kind of basically Eventbrite was not there. Partiful, I didn't see a lot of. Luma, everybody seemed to be doing Luma. So that's who people are using for their events. And then I would say, Snap next year, step up, or somebody with a social calendar tool. Amazing would be.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in the programming.
Yes.
A lot of tech. Yeah. Don't just talk about it.
The ability to just meet people and like do that in an easy way. WhatsApp could also work, but not so well. And then I would say number 9, again, this kind of goes back to it, but like, there's so much stuff for like kind of how did you put it? The opportunity and what no one else is doing. Is that how you want to phrase it?
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's not just, everybody's looking at, again, the standard of what has already been done in the past or what's ever happening. But the real need is in like transportation. It's in hats. It's in hydration. It's in how to keep cool. It's in like, look at those places. Again, it's got to be right for your brand, but there's such an opportunity. I thought, female Quotient, it could have been more dialed in, but the fact that they thought about a hat company, the fact that they partnered with a brand like Ferragamo, like there's the beginnings of some real, smart thinking there.
Yeah, I think the hat could have been a little bit more dialed in for Ferragamo's brand to benefit from it, like in a big way, but the concept was the base of there. And I would say flip-flops, snow cones, Band-Aids, e-bikes would have been a big one, sponsoring the Ubers, taxis from the airport. Let me just say, an opportunity.
And make it an experience. Like we've seen, make it an experience, not just like a branded thing. Yeah. Sell them something on the way that like so much opportunity.
Yeah.
So
And
much
there's also a
opportunity.
gazillion flights going in and out. Like, work with EasyJet, like, get something going, because there's opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, like EasyJet has those ads that are like kind of slide in cards. You could have had a really funny one that was like, are we ready for rosé yet? Like, it would have been like very, very funny. People would take a million photos. So free idea for
Yeah.
you there. And then,
Yep.
the last one will end on your point about like taking the work out of the basement. Like, let's
Yeah. I
remove
just
it from the
think,
dungeon.
Can Lines, it's an amazing, Yeah. And then just integrate it throughout. It's not just about the work from the basement, though I think that's a big part of it, but it's really about how overall you're taking this kind of very prestigious brand and making sure you're continuing to really own and show up in this event, you know? So much of it is quote unquote about experiences, yet everything is just at the Palais and the work itself is literally in the basement. And you kind of have to walk through this wide pathway and then you can go and you can see everything, but only those with a pass can see everything. There's just an opportunity to continue to really showcase the work, why we're there, the heritage of the brand, all of the parts and pieces, and really make sure you have a stake in the experience and you're not losing into that, because having just everything at the Palais, beautiful, great, fine, but also it's an experiential throughout. You could have the work in different places. You could have partner with different hotels, different experiences. You could just set up kind of a whole, experience along the croisette, like having
I'm going to
just
teach you how
some
to
of the
say
different work
croisette
shown.
before we end this podcast. Like, croisette, croisette, croisette.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I'm not calling it croissant, I think we're okay.
Yeah. All right. And then I would just like to say, before we close out, that the unofficial sponsor of Cannes is not rosé. This is a misunderstanding. It is Orangina. Orangina was being served at Pinterest, but also other places. And the enthusiasm that I saw for Orangina made me just wonder, like, why Orangina is not the biggest brand in the world. Like, people were throwing themselves at the Orangina. I was there getting a matcha. For the 28 people I saw online Pinterest, only one, and that was me, ordered a matcha. The rest of them at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever, 10 a.m. it was, were ordering Orangina. So that's what that is. And then the other unofficial sponsor is Dip. And like, let's change that next year. So thank you very much for this TED Talk.
I mean, I'm here for the dips.
Needed some steak. But yes, I will share also the list of where we got the really good coffee and the good steak. And I will share that in my Amigo profile in the show notes.
Yeah, that came in quite handy, actually. Would love to hear what people think about this. Would love to hear what they saw we didn't see. Would love to hear their thoughts on what we did see, what we said. Sharing comments.
Yeah, and tell us what we should be doing next year so that we can get our schedule aligned. Thank you.
Right. Maybe a little more planning. Yeah. All right.
Ciao, ciao.
Enjoy. Till next time.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.